Hello, back with another Keyframe coach review. We got another one from Connor, which is looking very nice. So Connor has already submitted this piece, and this is basically an update. So let's take a look.
You a cop?
Me? Duke Santos, a cop?
You a cop?
Me? Duke Santos, a cop?
Super nice. So it looks like you pretty much addressed all of the notes that I had before, Connor. So nice job. It's looking really nice, to be honest. Let me turn off the audio. Sorry if there was any double audio, by the way. So, yeah, like I said, nice job addressing the notes from before. It's come along really nicely, and I think it's in a much better spot, personally. So, yeah, let's take a look. I had a few thoughts. So the first thing was the eye direction. So I kind of noticed, I turn off held drawings. I kind of noticed there's some moments where the eye direction is feeling just a little off. And I feel like if you just bring, in this example, them a little closer together, so you kind of have the illusion of this kind of thing. It's kind of gives you the eye direction of they're just a little bit more focused, but also just a little bit more pupil. When you kind of bury those pupils and they feel like this, it can sometimes read not quite as clearly as, something which is a bit more like that. And I've just drawn all those sketches off screen. That's helpful, isn't it? So there you go. So this is, you see how they're a little buried, and then this one is not very buried. Not very buried. Okay. So that's what that draw over is. And then with these eye dots, I felt like they were maybe happening a little bit too early to lead the motion. So with my eye darts, I kind of like to have them happen maybe a frame or two before the movements. But when you have like a big eye dart and it's a complete change of direction, and then you have like when they're big eye darts, maybe if they're smaller thoughts, they can be small and then guide the head maybe a little later. But with these big eye darts, so you're going from, for example, this to this or this to this, like that is going to immediately make your head change because it's not a comfortable position to kind of hold like a side eye, So I kind of felt like you could add in a little beat where he looks to this side, just because you have that head rotation in there to that side. So it doesn't make tons of sense to me to have him look this way, but then his head go this way. So I'd personally have him maybe on frame 11, like just lead that a little bit, which then leads that look over to this side. And then maybe just on frame 19, just as that movement just before that movement starts to happen, then the eyes dart over to that side. And with eye darts, I always like to do them pretty much 90% of the way there. So I'll show you what I mean with one of the more. Let me just hide the sketch. You see here how it kind of feels like it's not 50%, but it feels like it's maybe 60% in terms of spacing. So it's kind of doing, you've got one position, you've got another position. You're maybe going there with your in-between on the eye dart. I'd probably go like here, personally, to 90%. I feel like that gives you a bit more, I don't know, just that in-between frame is not really helping. Like we can see that the eye, if you want to add a little settle, that's fine. But if you add too much of a settle, it just becomes a bit floaty and a bit unrealistic to how eyes move, because eyes move very fast. So almost no ease, but a tiny little ease of maybe one frame and you're 90% of the way there is kind of my rule. Well, it's not my rule, it's just a rule that's generally works in animation, I suppose. And then when you're doing blinks, I would just make sure to never have like kind of just white. I'd always try and just always make sure, even if the eye is this much open, you're just starting to show a little bit of pupil as those eyes are starting to open. Otherwise, you just get this kind of dead feel to the eyes. Even if that pupil realistically is sitting there, it's just cheat it so you just get that little bit, and then in the next frame, it can, go up to that. It's just about graphicness, and if you're drawing a 2D drawing, you wouldn't draw this frame where there's no pupil in there. I guess this is a note where the eyes just feel a little buried right now. See how it kind of just, you have all of this white space and then just that much pupil. It just feels like you could just have a little more of the eye in there, probably on both sides. And the thing is with eye directions is it doesn't necessarily have to be accurate to where the thing is that you're looking at. It just needs to sell to us that you are looking in that direction. So if you have an eye, okay, you have an eye and it's in that direction, you just buy that we're looking over there, right? It doesn't need to be, even though he's actually looking like at this piece of, I'm doing it again, need to not do that, need to zoom out. It doesn't, like, even though we might be looking at this bush or like at this part of the car, that's just going to take the eye, so we just kind of lose that, and it's just not as clear. If we think graphically, if we think as a 2D animator, which we should when we're animating, to me this just reads a lot clearer than when it's, buried behind the eyelid. I put a note here, which is a pretty lazy note to be honest, but it's kind of what I landed on because I was thinking about this section where he licks his lips, and I was kind of like, what should he be doing there? Because I don't particularly buy it that much. I mean, it reads as that, and it's nice that it is kind of an isolated motion because we're kind of drawn to that. It's just, to me, it doesn't feel natural. I'm drawn to it in a way because like nothing else is moving. It kind of like slivers out of there. You'd almost expect there to be some kind of like an open mouth and then some kind of, gesture with the face. So you get a kind of squash and stretch in the face. And you don't just have this isolated movement like in this section here. So you would maybe get some, Mr. Bean acting where it's like, or, just some, I'm not really sure what that acting choice is. My suggestion here, film some reference. Got a little mug here. To me, this long drawn out lick doesn't feel based in reality, but there's something about it which is throwing me off. I would go ahead, film some reference, and use that and see what's moving, what's supporting that action of the tongue moving, just to get that feeling a little less isolated to that motion. And maybe it is the mouth opening, maybe it is the upper face also supporting that. Or maybe it's just a quicker motion, a small open of the mouth and then whatever it is, just take a look and I guess come to your own conclusion with that. But the bottom line is that the actual note is, I don't 100% buy the licking of the lips right now. I like the intention behind it. It's just, to me, it doesn't sell itself as like a believable motion. I thought here maybe the shoulders just moving in a bit too isolated of a way, and kind of before this donut is finished, what it's doing, just kind of, we're looking here, and we're maybe still looking here because of the tongue, and then our eye just gets drawn over here. So a big thing, you know, you asked for polish notes in this, a big thing I like to think of when I'm doing polish is clarity, and is there something moving away from the action that I want the viewer to look at, right? So in this instance, we're doing this nice movement on the donut, which, by the way, I think looks much nicer, and the rhythm is much nicer in this version. But if we then have this great big thing over here doing the majority of the movement, yeah, it's only on a couple of frames, but you feel it, and it just starts to get a little bit muddied, right? So I think we can be a little more intentional with this and just delay it and make everything feel a little more connected. There's a little drawing I put in here just to, I like what you're doing with the chest, so the chest kind of rotates over. I don't feel that being like complemented with the hips. I would counter that a little, so these just come up slightly. So you get that kind of, as this chest goes, these hips go, and you're always getting these C shapes created in the spine. And just that connection through there. You see how if the chest is moving a great amount like this, and the hips are barely moving, there's probably something in there which is telling you, okay, either the chest is moving way too much or the hip is not moving enough. So yeah, I would just delay this shoulder personally. Doesn't quite have to happen so early. And it's also just like not feeling quite as snappy as you'd maybe like through here. So see how we get a little bit linear through here with the motion. So I think delaying that will only help with that. I think when you come in here, you just look at this angle of the donut, we get kind of a nice ease out through here, and then we stick on one frame. I just kind of look at lines when I'm polishing. So we got line, line, and then we flick over to here, and then we're kind of a bit stuck. I mean, we're still rotating a little, but if you look at basically this graphic line, you can see how there's like a big jump in spacing, and we kind of stick on that. So if you're going to do like a smooth sweeping motion, you just need to make sure that that spacing is pretty locked down. And by lockdown, I mean there's no like sticks in the spacing. There's nothing jarring in there. Yeah, I think this pose is working much nicer. It's much clearer to me. I do think there's some room to maybe clean up this shape a bit. And this is being quite harsh because I do think this reads really nicely. But if there's just anything you can do to literally get this kind of silhouette so we don't even see any of the back. I mean, it's only going to aid your animation. We get a few frames to notice this. So whatever you can do in that few frames to really, really sell to our viewer that, you know, exactly what's happening. And I don't think it's unclear. And you might even see this, you know, even at a feature level, this might be something that goes through and ends up in a final film. But if we can improve the clarity, let's improve the clarity. Better clarity is better animation, generally. This is nice. So I like what you're doing with the whole thing. It has like a nice staggered rhythm to it. The way everything kind of cascades for his body is really nice in this take. I think it's really nice and successful. Nice job, man. I did want to mention the arc on this donut, just because to me, as a viewer, again, thinking about clarity, kind of a theme. I'm kind of looking, you know, here you've got this big motion, cool. And then I'm looking like here as well, mostly, because you're looking for his reaction, right? The donut is not as important. So when I see this, if I look in this region, what's moving the most is the donut in terms of screen space. You can see how that like does this kind of spacing down here. Whereas this is kind of staying the same. So I would just tone that down a little bit so it's more about his, you know, if he's up here and then we see, ooh, then that's maybe a little clearer than if we go ooh, and do a big motion as well as doing that facial take. So I would kind of keep this in almost the same pose or just tone down the motion you have by like 90%. So we just get that like, it just has some mechanics to it, but it's not distracting. So it doesn't become distracting because it's too still, but it also doesn't become distracting because it's moving too much for the sake of moving. When it could be still, there's no reason for it to move here. So let's keep it still. Let's focus on this. Let's focus on this. I just thought you could maybe find a slightly graphically clearer shape on that eyebrow. So it just kind of goes up in that arc to support that eye and that shape. To me, that eyebrow just felt a little default through there. There's some moments, and I haven't pointed them all out. I mean, this isn't an hour and a half review. This is just a Keyframe Coach quick review. But there's some moments in here where I do feel the IK-ness of the arms, so that's something I would work on. When it comes to polishing your arms, I don't think it's terrible to work in IK. I personally like to work in IK. Yes, I'm working on 2s on the show I'm on now, so I get away with a bit more. But if you want to stay in IK when you polish, I think that's cool. I would just make sure when you're tracking things, and this doesn't just apply for this moment, you're kind of looking, like I said, with that donut with the lines, you're kind of looking at all of these lines and just how the spacing between them, not only how that spacing moves, but also how it moves in relation to all of the body parts. So it's quite a juggling act, but you can polish IK to look polished and realistic and not too IK, in my opinion, to like a very high level. So another tip as well, don't track this and don't track this. Track these lines, right? So don't track the things in red. Do track these things. So you're tracking rotation as well as translation. Because you could track this and it could be perfect, and then you see that there's no like compression in there, right? So if you ever feel that everything is kind of perfectly working through here, and then there's just not really any, this line is a bit stuck on the arm, then, you know, you might have a problem where you're not doing enough compression that you might naturally get with FK. But it's just something to be aware of. I thought here it maybe felt a little unnatural to put his hand on his chest and then splay it out. Or, I mean, maybe it does work because you're like compressing and then stretching essentially. But I would just have something a bit bigger in there so it's a bit more like me, if that makes sense. I mean, I drew that, but I think to act it out actually makes more sense. Me? I think that makes sense. Here, I just wanted to talk about the arc of the head. Let me hold and sketch. So, just something in here where little polish thing, thinking about spacing. See how we actually, if we just look at this line, for example, kind of stuck. We move back, and then we just jump forward. So this spacing doesn't feel super polished to me. I would personally like to see things having a bit more overlap and kind of, you know, dragging the head when that chest is moving forward. Just basically this needs an ease, and I think things are just feeling a bit too connected right now, especially for this like over the top motion. You know, you really want to be like, just really overdo it. So that's what that drawing is. Just step through it and see how we're kind of like bridging the spacing between all of that. And even keeping the body motion you have, just kind of delaying what happens with the rotation of the chest and the neck, and therefore like the translation of the head, but also the rotation of the head. If that makes sense. Maybe watch that part a couple of times so it does make sense. But you know, the translation of the head is decided by the rotation of the neck and also the torso, right? So you rotate these back, that changes the position of the head, but you also have the rotation of the head. So I'm not saying to grab the head, move it back. I'm saying to use the whole body and get that head in that kind of screen space. Because that's the most important thing when it comes to the body at the end of the day. We're looking at the head, we're looking for the eyes, we're always trying to connect to that character. So making sure the spacing on that is perfect, or as close to perfect as you can have it, is of utmost importance. So yeah, kind of just a bit of that to work into what you have. Looking at this pose, I don't think it necessarily like doesn't work. I just thought when I compare it to something here, these are feeling like a little bit too pushed. It's feeling like he's got these big balls on his shoulders. I just feel like you can get the same thing but not have him feel so broken. But I think what that also does is just relieves a little bit of the tension in his arms so that we can not feel so broken through here. And if you can, maybe there's a bendy control. We can just move that out and get these lines a bit nicer. I think doing this, lowering this as well, will give you a chance to kind of get that flow through there a little better. Into there. And then I just felt like the hand was in a little bit of an awkward position. I would just probably have it a bit more like this, personally. So maybe that actually looks a bit more like this. Hands are not my strong suit. So whatever that looks like in 3D, but essentially rotate around this way so that we're not, it kind of feels like he's gesturing and he's got the donut on this side, but he's like rotated it way too far around. So kind of looking here, it would feel more natural to just be rotated, right? Just rotate that whole hand. I think the acting's very funny. I think what you did was really nice. So this would end up not quite as high of a position. You know, it's nice that these shoulders shrug up a little, but maybe it just doesn't end up in such a shrugged position. A similar note here with the hand, it just feels a little bit too flat to camera right now. Just feel like you could maybe get it a bit more. Again, hand's not my strong suit, but whatever that kind of looks like in 3D. Just to break up all of this a bit. You know, so we get a clear 1, 2, 3. We're not stacking those so much. And we're also not kind of like breaking the silhouette of that. Just think this would be a bit of a clearer silhouette personally. Okay, come back to that drifty note in 1 second. There was a little thing in the hips here. It's just feeling a little bit broken through here because we're so bent over. I feel like you want to get a little bit flatter through here just so that these get a bit more of a reverse C. At the moment, your hips are like this and your chest is like this. So where it looks like you're going for a C shape, which would then like continue down, it actually feels like you've got, if the hips are like this and then the chest is like this, you've actually then got a little bit of this shape going on. Sorry about the coughing. Got a tickly throat. Forgot to get water for this review, but we're here now. So I would just have this just rotate up a little bit in order to make sure that that's like reading as a C shape and the hips don't feel so uncomfortable. And then that drifty note is just, with eye darts, if they're really small ones, I'd almost just do them on 1 frame, but if not, like for a movement like this, let's zoom right in. So I can kind of see some, just cough away from the microphone. Kind of see you have this like constant motion through the eyes. I would do that as, I'd basically go in there and set some keys and then like just turn it to stepped. I mean, that's maybe not what you want to do for your workflow, but have an eye pose, stick in it. I mean, you could also stand to just maybe get them a little bit more focused. Come like 6 frames later, for example, just go somewhere slightly different or towards where you want to go to. And just repeat that. So you're never splining between eye positions. You're always kind of darting. Even if you're like following something, it's always just a load of very small eye darts. Generally. I just feel like that gives a bit more of a believable character. I mean, sure, sometimes the eyes could move like that, but to me, it reads a bit more intentional when you're doing the eye dots. It's kind of difficult to read a character's eyes when they're just floating from one position to another. But anyway, great pass, Connor. Thank you very much for sending this in again. And I hope that helps. If you're looking for a keyframe, I can never do the outro, but if you're looking for an animation review, please check out Keyframe Coach. Cheers.